Okay, here's a contrarian view in crypto, although maybe less contrarian for other groups of people. But I think that crypto has a very hard time reaching product market fit in a lot of cases, precisely because it gets traction with speculative use cases that go nowhere and eventually collapse. Here's another view that's pretty contrarian in crypto, though I think if you think about it enough, it starts to become obvious, is for a lot of cases with payments, people don't want to send Bitcoin, Ethereum, or any token. They want to send dollars. And actually, stablecoins are a fantastic way to do this on crypto rails. Third contrarian thought, MetaMask, very bad. Ledger and Trezor, pretty abysmal hardware wallet experiences, and they can and should be so much simpler and easier to use. Fourth contrarian thought, addresses and seed phrases have got to go. Everyone who's building crypto builds with these two primitives in mind, and they can't see beyond the existing forest and realize that for crypto to move forward, it needs to leave addresses and backup phrases behind. Fifth contrarian thought, multi-party computation is not as secure as a lot of people think it is, and we shouldn't rely on it when we can use things like multisig or Gnosis Safe. Unfortunately, a lot of services like Fireblocks and Coinbase use MPC for certain things. There are better ways, more secure ways. Sixth contrarian thought, the FAT protocol thesis is completely wrong. And what you really want to do is own the user experience, the customer experience. Seventh contrarian thought, the majority of the crypto industry has convinced themselves that the right path to crypto adoption is to have so much speculation that it increases the user base of crypto so that later we can clean it up. And I think this is completely wrong and pulls us down the wrong path. And we need to start along the path of sustainable, proper, real-world use cases for crypto that drive real value. Eighth contrarian thought. A lot of the practitioners, entrepreneurs, investors, etc., are gamblers. They've become gamblers. They came into crypto for one reason, and they forgot why they got in here. And they backwards rationalized what they're doing because they're getting usage with one particular use case. And so it's the curse of a certain type of adoption. Ninth contrarian thought. The Ethereum community has given up on even modest levels of privacy, and it is more important than they think for gaining adoption in a variety of use cases. 10th contrarian thought. The number one crypto app is USDT. The number two crypto app is USDC. And the number three crypto app is Bitcoin. 11th contrarian thought. Tron, the blockchain, has more adoption than any other blockchain. 12th contrarian thought. The blockchain actually makes a lot of sense for voting. And people who say otherwise haven't really thought about it enough. 13th contrarian thought. DAOs are not being set up the right way. They're typically too centralized. There are often admin keys. A lot of times there's very clear people who are running it and have too much power. And there are better ways to do it. 14th contrarian thought. There are a lot of very interesting untapped dynamics with DAOs where they can be designed in a way that they're fully autonomous. There aren't admins or board members who have very aggressive powers. And you can do some interesting collaborative and social and co-investing dynamics with such designs. 15th contrarian thought. there are a lot of use cases of blockchains and crypto that could and would take off if they were built in a way to explicitly evade regulation. But most people are not willing to go there, and almost nobody is willing to go there. And so a lot of these don't actually get explored.
I don't think that's the reason why we didn't find product market fit yet. I think there are two reasons why we didn't yet. The first one is because of the current infrastructure, which is still too unscalable, and the transaction fees are still too high. And then the second problem is a regulatory problem, where we're still in this gray area where it's not clear what is allowed and what is not allowed, and so people just avoid it altogether, essentially. Like for the average entrepreneur, it's just like a bad deal because the transaction fees are way too high. So even if you as the entrepreneur abstract them away from the user, it will just be incredibly expensive. And then second, there's a problem of regulation where your app can be shut down at any time. And then you also have the App Store regulations, with Apple and Google, especially Apple, where it's very hard to get on the App Store. And then once you're on the App Store as a crypto app, you have to pay like 30% of the transaction fees, which makes no sense. So it's ridiculous. I mean, I think, being a VC in crypto is largely participating in a private sale and then dumping on retail once the token launches. I mean, that's basically the gist of the strategy. And most of them, except like the real, actual, great capital allocators, most of them are just doing this. I think that's very true, and it's unfortunate because I think it was caused largely by what happened with Tornado.cash, where basically anyone working on privacy tools got pretty scared. I know there was Aztec working on an Ethereum rollup, and it actually even launched their contracts on Ethereum to allow you to basically use smart contracts in a private way, like on-chain smart contracts. So smart contracts on Ethereum, you could use them privately, but they stopped it. And they never mentioned why, but it was obvious that it was because of regulatory concerns.
I agree with that, but I don't see the regulatory headwinds going away. If anything, I think it's just going to get worse. So that would argue that the actual use cases for crypto, other than hodling, are really evading capital controls and gambling, and both of those are better done in fixed dollar terms and not in fixed Bitcoin terms.
I actually agree with this point. Something analogous to this is the GameStop short squeeze, where there was a lot of speculation to get GameStop to pump as high as possible. And then people thought because of all the speculation would cause, more customer retention or more sales, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, it just didn't come to fruition. If you build for speculation, then all there is speculation. You're not going to get an outside use case outside of that unless you intentionally build for it. Right now, there are a lot of fears regarding voting manipulation, voting fraud. And those of us who are versed in blockchain technology know that this is the better option than everything else on the market for voting. But for the mass public, implementing a new technology just flames those fears. How would you educate the public or address their worries about voting manipulation or fraud if we were to use blockchain technology?
So the update is that the Tornado Cash developers were charged on justice.gov. I think that it's not really fair to say it's not happening. Probably any work that is going to happen with privacy-preserving payments or platforms similar to Tornado, like Railgun or like Aztec Network, will probably be done by anon individuals. You then wouldn't expect to see the kind of profile that you have normally seen, where you have doxed founders, where you have people going to conventions talking about it. It would basically be pseudo-anonymous people. You would never see them in real life because these are the table stakes for developing this kind of technology now. Since this is the Crypto Contrarian Room, I would like to ask why we are sure that blockchain-based voting systems are provably better than the existing institutions. And I'm going to put a link in this chit which details Sarah Jamie Lewis, who has worked on voting systems, who has worked on privacy, and it goes into the nuts and bolts of why specific things that appear inefficient in voting are in place.
Here's another thought that I don't hear articulated really ever, is the fact that like crypto has been a toy until very recently, like a really not impressive toy either. And the fact that Bitcoin gets like maybe 13 TPS with like SegWit, and then Ethereum like maxes out like 20 if you're doing peer-to-peer transactions, if you're doing DEX swaps, much less, stuff like that. Like these are just toys. These are not like serious projects. So recently you can make the argument that if Lightning does scale, I don't think it does for capital efficiency reasons, or Ethereum L2's take off, or if even something like Solana is viable, like then you have a product that actually works. You can actually have scale. So my argument is these things haven't gone mainstream because they're not valid payment solutions, and like you need that as a money feature as well. So they're fine for speculation because you can do speculation with like low TPS. They're fine for maybe a gold type use case, but they're not fine for an actual monetary system until recently. If ETH L2s work, if Lightning works, or if architectures like Solana work, and I think Sol almost certainly works. So everyone's asking why has crypto not made it? Why is it not the new world financial system? The answer is like the technology wasn't ready, which I think is very obvious. And even something like Zcash, like a solid privacy architecture, that's like only recently like is that valid, right? Where they have the trustless setup, they're starting to go privacy by default, private by default. They're going to go proof of stake and higher scalability, and still have higher TPS eventually. Like only recently are they even past the point of just being a toy. So these systems are going from toys to what they're supposed to be, which are like, nuclear, not nuclear, but, like neutron bombs against a bureaucracy that controls things that like none of us voted for. And of course you do that by like taking away their financial system. So, and you can only do that if you can scale to a global level to service people. You can't have people like, oh, where's your transaction? Oh, it's in a mempool. And like they have to like troubleshoot their mempool. Like no vendor is going to do that. That's like an embarrassing thing. Like it's not a valid technology play. Like fiat is better. Except in like edge cases where insanity is just getting out of control, which is now becoming the standard. So there's an argument to be made there, but you still don't have the ability to onboard the world until you have scalability. So like fundamentally scalability has only been arguably reached recently. I mean, how absurdly optimistic are we that we would even believe that a technology stack, and money is a technology stack, that you can only have like a few dozen people use simultaneously at any given time is going to take over the world. And like we're very serious in those moments in time, it's going to take over the world. Like in 2017 seemed kind of serious. 2020 seemed very serious, but like fundamentally the technology is just not there. Like you can't do it. You technically can't do it. You objectively cannot do it. So like there's really no reason for like that level of like absurd level of like optimism, right? But like now the reason is here. Like now the technology is coming online. We should be hyped right now. Now is the time to like really be interested in crypto. Now is the time to make fortunes. And just before, being early makes you lots of money, which is very nice. But we just can't compete with a global monetary system when you can have like, 30 people use the system at any given time. It's super embarrassing. Like, honestly. I mean, just try making the argument. Try making the argument that we could even have global crypto adoption if you can't onboard people because the system doesn't support them. It's a nonsense argument. So fundamentally, that's what's wrong. It's not seed phrases. It's not anything else. It's literally just the technology stack was a toy and it was too early, but now it's not. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how I make money. By having good judgment, just looking at the situation and identifying what makes sense. There's usually just one high leverage thing that makes sense, which is the fact that scalability was not available. And now that I've identified that, I pointed out, people will shrug it off, but then I'll get massively wealthy off of minting based on that. And then everyone's gonna be like, well, how do you make money? I was like, well, it doesn't matter what I say. You're not going to listen anyway. People like poverty.
It doesn't matter what we say, does it? Yeah, I think this is all good. I mean, this is all good and right. I think one of the big open questions that hasn't been solved, I think a lot of people assume that calling certain aspects of crypto money would cause things in there to begin to organize like a kind of free capitalist society. I think the problem is it's sort of like the container and what's contained. Money and capitalism has always been a pretty sure proxy for how things go and how to look at the world. But now, if you just invent something and say now that's money in there, that doesn't mean that all the capitalist benefits of it the money that was doing it. It was the meaning behind the money. And so, just because you make any game have some economic consequences to it, even if they, travel out to the real world, still doesn't mean that people want to go in and play that game, because there's not necessarily the meaning there, right? Everyone thinks how dumb Ferrari and gold are or whatever as a way to store value, but those are pretty cool things, right? They're not what they stored value because that's just how it worked out. Ferraris are fucking cool, right? I don't know if you've ever held a gold bar, but it's wild. So anyway, but you're right. You can't say anything out loud. It doesn't make sense. So the second word always makes the first sound like gibberish. Over time, things get a price tag, because they're worth it in one sense of view, but just slapping a price tag on something and walking away doesn't always and everywhere necessarily mean that eventually someone pays it and that becomes the new mutually agreed upon value. I think it's really, I guess big picture in my life, I'm starting to realize how dangerous it is to care more about what it looks like when you get there than what it is before you decide to go.